And he was like, well, yeah, you know, you got your guys' stuff is really dope and like we've hit you up multiple times. And I was like, you've never hit me up. I'm sitting in the corner, so you guys know it's about to be a juicy story. If you don't have a drink, if you don't have a snack, we're probably gonna be here a while, so I would advise you to like go and get that and then come back and watch this story in its entirety. So a couple disclaimers. The first one, I'm changing the name of everybody in this story except for like Kasairi. I'm changing the name of everybody, the name of the city, the name of like food places, stuff like that, just to protect the identities. Like, and I don't know why, I'm not telling you guys anything that isn't true. I also want to mention that how the people acted in this story is not necessarily a reflection of who they are today or who they are in general, because I just had, you know, super brief interactions with some of these people. But like I said before, none of this is false. All of this is 100% true. All right, now let's get into the story. So it all started when mine and Kasairi's good friend, we'll call him Tommy in this story, he came out to LA for a showcase. Tommy's a producer and he competed in this showcase with other producers, and he didn't win, but he did really well, and I know he got some like really good connections from that. Beside the point. The runner-up from that showcase, I asked Tommy to introduce me to him, and he actually knew who I was, which was really surprising because I thought, you know, nobody knows who I am. So Tommy had mentioned going to this conference that was going to be out of state, and Kasairi and I were kind of just like, yeah, whatever. We weren't really thinking about going. But when that happened, when the runner-up recognized who I was, I kind of thought like, who else maybe has heard our names but, you know, hasn't put a face to a name and stuff like that we could just go and connect with, you know? So Kasairi and I kind of talked about it, and we thought like, okay, maybe it would actually be kind of beneficial for us to go to this conference. So Tommy had already went back home after this showcase, and Kasairi and I, after we had our conversation, we called him up and we were kind of just like, do you think it would be beneficial for us to go? And he was just like, yeah, absolutely. And I was like, okay, she and I are both like, you know, kind of socially awkward. We're not very outgoing and stuff like that in social settings. Like, would you introduce us to people? Would you let us hang out with you? Would you kind of like show us around and stuff like that? And he was like, yes, absolutely, I would do that for you guys. So we were like, cool, this is great, we're gonna go. Kasairi ends up asking her job, and they end up telling her no because they needed her to stay there, and frick that job. But I'm just kidding. But they needed her to stay, so I had to decide if I was just gonna go by myself, and I ended up on a whim deciding to just go. And I think I decided like 2 days before leaving. I also find out that mine and Kasairi's good friend Susie is going. We're gonna call her Susie in this video. I think I saw Susie like post a couple flyers about how she was gonna be doing multiple shows at this conference. So I hit her up and I'm just like, hey, I know you're going to the conference. I'm thinking of going, like, could I hang out with you and stuff like that? Kind of like, you know, just ask her like the same things. And she's like, yes, girl, please come, blah, blah, blah. And then she kind of gives me like an explanation of her situation. And she's like, I'm gonna be with these other artists, and this one girl, her name is Lillian in this story, is gonna be managing me. She's just like, yeah, we're just gonna do like, you know, like a little trial run type thing where she's gonna act as my manager for this conference. And she booked me these shows, and I was like, oh, that's really cool, like, good for her. I love when stuff like that happens to my artist friends, you know? So I thought. So I ended up catching a flight out there, and it's a red eye, and I could not sleep on the flight because the person behind me's breath smelled so bad, and they were like knocked out of sleep. So I was just like smelling their breath the entire flight, so I did not fall asleep. So it felt like I didn't sleep that whole night, because I actually didn't, because my flight was going from one day to the next. So I ended up staying with my brother's friend who lives 30 miles outside of the city. So by the time I got to the city, got my rental car, went, got the keys from my brother's friends, went to his house and all that stuff to stay there, it was already like 9 in the morning or something like that, and I was just like, I'm going to sleep. So I checked in with Tommy, checked in with Susie, was like, we can meet up later, but your girl's gonna take a nap because I'm so tired. So I did. So later on I woke up, I hit up Susie. She was downtown in the city at like the main event center for the conference. I go down there and I pick her up. We run into like some people that we know and stuff like that, and they were like kind of trying to like invite themselves into our plans and things, but it didn't end up happening. But I had also called Tommy, and he was with his good friend Dill. Yes, I'm naming all these characters after the Rugrats. Tommy and Dill happen to be at a studio that is actually really well known in like this niche genre of independent music. In the grand scheme of things, it's not really that well known and it's not really that big of a deal, but in this niche genre, it is like as big as it gets. So Tommy and Dill are like, yeah, you can come pick us up. We'll shoot you the address. Just make sure that you don't share it with anybody or anything like that, because you know, they don't really like people just like showing up here. And I was like, cool. Me and Susie go pick them up. We go get something to eat. And then after we get something to eat, we go get some ice cream, and we're just like chilling, having a good time, talking about what we're gonna do the next day and stuff like that. The next day was gonna be like a super like jam-packed, eventful day, because Tommy and Dill were gonna be going to the studio and I was trying to go with them, and they actually let me, which was like super sweet. But we were gonna be going to the studio and spending, I think we were spending like 8 hours there. And then after that, Susie actually had a showcase with like a bunch of other artists at this one club downtown. And then after that, there was gonna be a producer showcase, and Dill was participating in the showcase and Tommy was actually like one of the hosts. And since I rented a car, I was gonna be taking them everywhere, which was perfect because I kind of just wanted to hang out with them since I know them. They were kind of like, you know, like my comfort for this trip since Kasari wasn't with me. So we go get some ice cream and we're posting on Instagram stories and stuff like that, and we're just like kind of sitting and talking and stuff like that. There were no events going on this day. So this other producer, who is now a good friend of mine after this trip, but before that I really didn't know him, but he sees on Tommy's story that like we're all tagging each other and posting each other, and he's like, wow, no invite or something like that. So Tommy's like, is it cool if he comes through and stuff? We're like, yeah, tell him to come through. So he came, and we're gonna call him Chucky. So Chucky comes through and we're all chilling outside, and it's like this outdoor like shopping center type thing, and it's like really nice and like kind of hipster. So we're just sitting, we're talking about different things. Chucky is telling us all of these hilarious stories about like different artists that he's worked with and stuff like that, and it's super fun. It's like a cool time. So the girl that was managing Susie, Lily, her name is Lillian in the story, Lillian starts hitting up Susie. And she's like, I have to come pick you up. We gotta go somewhere, blah, blah, blah. So Lillian ends up picking up Susie. I end up taking all the boys back to their Airbnb, and then I drive back to where I was staying. And by the time I got back, it was probably like after midnight, like a little after midnight, like 12:30 or something like that. Because we had to be up early to be at the studio anyway, so we kind of called it an early night, even though, you know, 12 is still like kind of late, but it's not that late, you know. That night I had actually, like, as I was driving back to where I was staying, like I was kind of feeling bad for like going to the studio without Susie, because again, this studio is like not a big deal in the grand scheme of life, but like in this niche genre, it's a really big deal. So I had kind of felt bad about that, but like when I told her, she was just like, it's okay. Like honestly, the group that I'm with would probably be jealous, like if I were to go and they couldn't go. And that was like red flag number one of many, but I was just like, oh, okay, well then I'll see you later tonight at her show. So I was super stoked that I was getting to go to the studio with Tommy and Dill, because I was just stoked to like work on music, check it out. You know, I've never been there. They've been there before. Dill actually used to work at the studio. So I go to bed, wake up the next morning, go to pick them up, and we head to the studio. And before we go to the studio, we stop and get Chick-fil-A for breakfast. This is important because to all of us, we were talking about how like the food so far in the city, like it just wasn't good, and even the Chick-fil-A tasted a little off. So we get to the studio, and before we go in, Dill is kind of giving me a rundown of like, don't post anything on your story, don't tag the location, don't tell anybody where it's at. You know, it's kind of frowned upon for people to kind of like flaunt that they're here at the studio. And I'm just like, understood. Like I wasn't gonna tag anyway because I'm too embarrassed. You know, I'll repost, but I wasn't gonna like just like post something and tag the place and stuff like that. Like I was just too embarrassed. So we go inside, and one of the artists from the label is actually there working on his album, and he's like almost done with it. And so he comes in and he's talking to us. I think he already knew Dill, he already knew Tommy. He didn't know me, obviously. You know, I introduced myself to him and stuff like that. And he's just telling us like the type of track that he's looking for in case, you know, we wanted to try to work on something for his album. So me, Tommy, and Dill are like, cool, bet, you know? And we did not end up making a track for his album, but still some pretty cool things happened. Dill felt like he wasn't getting any good ideas, and he's just like, I'm so sorry, like I'm just not getting any good ideas and stuff like that. But we worked on the track, and like I had a good time. And then Tommy ended up starting another track, and I was like kind of like vibing to it, like writing a melody, writing some lyrics to it a little bit, and the artist ended up walking in during that point in time. And so I started kind of like singing it to him, and then he kind of stood there and was like vibing to it and like using my melody and stuff like that, and like kind of like wrote a verse like kind of on the spot and stuff like that, and it just was cool. It was like really fun. The artist is kind of a well-known artist, and I've like kind of been a fan of his since I was like young. It was such a cool experience. But we didn't end up making any tracks for his album. I think that Dill actually ended up getting a placement on his album with the track that he did on his own, which is super cool. Good for him, because he had been working on that connection for like years. So while we're there, Tommy he took a couple Instagram stories, and one of the stories that he took was like it was literally just of the monitor, like, you know, little sized speaker monitor with like the lights or something, like, you know how they're like the programmed LEDs or whatever behind it. Like, it was literally just like a boomerang of that. No sound, no nothing. And this other producer, who I actually know because I've hung out with him like several times, he's also friends with Tommy. Friends, you know. He messages Tommy, like replies to his story, and knows exactly where Tommy is, which is like crazy because it was literally just a regular monitor. And he's like, oh, so you're at this studio? Oh, you're in the big leagues now. Or something like that, he tells him. And then like Tommy starts telling us stories about how this particular producer has slighted him like several times. Like, there was one time when Tommy wanted to come out with this like particular product, and he told this producer, and he wanted them to collaborate on it, and this producer literally dropped that exact product on his own. Which is so dirty, but like, sometimes people in music, even though it's just like independent music, well, some of them are kind of bigger. They've worked with like bigger names and stuff like that, but still, like, people in music sometimes can just be like so grimy, you know? Anyway, it's basically time for us to finish up at the studio, but we're like the last ones there. Like, it was just us and I think some of the interns that worked there, and they were like, you guys can chill, because we still had some time to kill before Susie's show. So they let us take a nap. I did not fall asleep because Tommy was snoring up a storm. I don't know if Dill was able to fall asleep because Tommy was snoring up a storm. And then we were ready to head to Susie's show. So before we leave, Tommy decides to change his clothes, and basically we were going to be the last ones there. Like, we close the door, it locks, that's it for the night type thing for the studio. I had already went outside, Dill had already went outside. Tommy was still in there changing, and when he came outside of the studio, he was like putting his clothes in my trunk, and then all of a sudden he starts puking like in the parking lot. I don't know if there's a good puke, but it was like really bad. He had some sort of stomach bug, because it wasn't just like a one-time puke. He puked a couple times in the parking lot and was like, I don't feel good. So I'm like, okay, well, we gotta go to Susie's show. Are you gonna be okay? Like, what do you want to do and stuff like that? And he's just like, let's just go. We'll just go, you know, over there. And it was probably like a 20-minute drive. It wasn't very far. As we're driving, like, he's like, pull over. So I'm like having to pull over so he can throw up on the side of the freeway. And it just was bad. One of the things that he was really concerned about was the fact that he was going to be hosting the showcase later tonight, so he like could not be sick. So we get to Susie's show. Tommy like pretty much heads straight for the bathroom, and I think he's just in there for like a minute just throwing up, just trying to get it all out. And I'm telling you again, that Chick-fil-A did not taste right. There was something about it that didn't taste right. So anyway, we get to the show and we meet up with Susie, and we also meet up with Chucky, who was with us the night before. I get to meet some artists that I know online, and I get to meet them in person, and that was like really cool. They were all just like super friendly and super nice. Susie decides to introduce me to Lillian, which is, you know, her temporary manager for this conference. I go and meet Lillian, and it's literally like Lillian's like, hi, so what do you do? And I'm like, oh, I produce, I write. And she's like turning around like, hey, I need you to help me with this, that, and then, oh, hey, like, can you know, and she's like starting like 3 other conversations, like, while she's in the middle of asking me a question. That is like one of my pet peeves, is like when you ask me something and then you either talk over me or you stop paying attention. It's like, why would you ask me anything? Like, if you're too busy to talk, you're too busy to talk. You don't gotta try to talk and like still be busy. So right away, I'm kind of just like, oh, okay, so Lillian's kind of all over the place. As Lillian was talking to other people and asking me questions while I'm kind of just standing there awkwardly, we ended up taking a picture with Lillian and Susie and me. And this is gonna be important later. So while we're there, I run into this other artist, and we're gonna call her Angelica. Angelica worked for the studio that I had been at earlier, that Big Deal studio. And Angelica, like, I had met her before. She had come out to LA for something, and like I'd met her before. We've interacted online a lot. We follow each other and stuff like that. And like, she's always been super sweet to me, super cool, very nice to me and Kasairi. So we see each other and she's like, hey, let me introduce you to some of my coworkers, like just being like really sweet, you know? And so she introduces me to some of them. It was such a nice gesture. So shout out to her for that. So there were like at least a dozen artists performing at this show. There were like a lot of performances going on. Susie hadn't gone up yet, and Susie was actually meeting with this owner of another label in this genre, and it's another bigger label in this genre, and that owner, we'll call him Drew. And Drew had connections to like other streaming services and other music platforms and stuff like that, and people like representatives from those companies were actually there at this show. So he was taking Susie and introducing her to these different people, and that was really cool. So as one of these other artists is performing, Drew comes up to me, and we had followed each other on social media. So I knew who he was. I kind of knew what he did, but not, you know, 100%. Obviously I know he's the co-owner of this label, but I didn't understand like, you know, everything else that he did in music. He came up to me and he was talking to me, and I was like super honored because he kind of is, again, he's kind of like a big deal in this space. So he came up to me and he was kind of just asking me like, you know, what are your goals with music, and you know, what is it that you do? And I was telling him like, you know, me and Kasairi, we, you know, have made these projects, and, you know, just telling him different things we were planning on doing, different things we had done and stuff like that. And so he's listening, and then he kind of starts sharing about what it is that he does with distribution and how he has contracts with these different companies and stuff like that. And at the point where like he was gonna start explaining these things, Susie actually was up to perform, and she had told me, please make sure that you take pictures, videos, stories, like all that stuff of my performance. And I was like, okay. So I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like she wants me to take like, you know, pictures and videos of her performance and stuff like that, so we can continue this conversation later. And he's just like, okay. And we never did. And in retrospect, I actually think that that might have been a good thing. You know, no disrespect to him or anything like that, but I just think that the type of agreements that he makes with artists probably would not have worked for Kasairi and I. So shout out to the Lord for working out the timing on that one. So Susie performs and she kills her performance. As soon as she gets off stage, Angelica ends up coming up to her, and Angelica's just complimenting her like, oh my gosh, you're so dope, your music is so good. And then Angelica says something like, oh, I've never heard of you. And Susie is like, oh, I believe you have. And you guys, the way I felt like Mr. Krabs, the way the room was just like because Angelica really just got called out by Susie like that, right? So I was just standing there like and Angelica is standing there like smiling, because Angelica is very sweet. She's not, you know, gonna like argue with anybody or anything like that, but she really did get called out, because the next thing that happened was Angelica goes on Instagram and it's like, oh, what's your Instagram name? Like looking her up to follow her, and she's already following her. And at that point, somebody pulled Susie away to like go take pictures and stuff like that. And I was just like, yikes, you know, like Angelica really just got called out. And in Angelica's defense, she was following like a lot of people at that time. You know, maybe she got confused. So I look around the room and everybody that I came with, I don't see any of them there. So I went outside to try and find the guys, and I actually ended up running into this artist that I've worked with before and that I've definitely had like many conversations with, but we had never met in person. And that was probably like the highlight of that whole trip, was getting to speak with him. He has no idea, but he really like encouraged me at a time when like I really needed it when it came to music. He was kind of, again, because everyone, you know, kind of asks you like, what are your goals and stuff like that with music? What are you working on? And he was kind of like asking me or encouraging me to like get more specific with my goals, and he was kind of giving me a breakdown with how he operates when it comes to his goals, because he's like, there's so many different things that I want to do. If there's something that I want to get done, I find that I'm more productive if I solely focus on that one thing for a couple months. He was really into, and he still is, like really into the sync licensing space, and he's completely killing that today. He was killing it then, he's killing it even more now. He was actually somebody that really encouraged me and really like helped me, like pulled me into that space. And he was kind of asking me like, you know, what are some of the things that you think you know, are your weaknesses? What do you think are your strengths? Like, he was basically saying, you know, get specific about those things. And he told me, like, he was just like, in my opinion, your strength is in your pen. Like, you can write a little bit. And that really meant a lot to me. I was like, thank you, because I do feel like I'm a good songwriter, but I don't know, sometimes you just hear, you know, comments from other people that are like, your writing's okay, or like, you know, you guys write decently or stuff like that. But I had always felt like that's my strongest suit. Like, even today, I always feel like I'm confident in my ability to write a good song. So it just felt really good, like, talking to him and, like, you know, just getting encouraged and getting like practical advice that I could like go back home and start applying right away. So shout out to him for that. So Chucky and Dill are outside, and so I kind of go and join them in conversation. Tommy was still in the bathroom throwing up, and he ends up coming outside, and he's basically like trying to find a cure. It's almost time for us to leave to go to the showcase, and Chucky and Dill are both participating in the showcase, and Tommy is helping host it. Susie comes outside and she's like, oh, you should definitely drink some ginger tea. There's a Jamaican place next door and you should definitely drink ginger tea. And I was like, oh duh, like, why didn't I think of that? Because ginger tea works, you guys. If you're sick, drink some ginger tea. That joint works. So we go next door, he gets his tea, and we're like kind of sitting around talking, and I'm telling the boys about the exchange between Susie and Angelica when Susie told her, like, oh, I believe you do. And they're all cracking up because I think we had a conversation literally about that the night before, about how like people will literally act like they don't know you in this independent music scene, even though they'll follow you, they leave comments, they might even post about you one time in the story or something like that, retweet you or whatever, and then when they see you in person, they literally act like they don't know who you are, and it's just like, okay. So anyway, we leave that spot, we go to the showcase, and we get to the showcase. The ginger tea worked. Tommy's not throwing up anymore, so shout out to Susie for recommending the ginger tea. Dill and Chucky, they compete alongside some other producers. Tommy hosts, and it's great. The whole thing is great. It's super late at night because I think the showcase actually started at midnight. So by the time it ended, it was already like 2 in the morning. And we stayed around talking, and I met some other artists that I had never met in person, that I had known, you know, online and stuff like that. And that was cool too, because some of them are like artists that I had grown up on and stuff like that. So Susie ends up telling me and Tommy and Dill and Chucky that Lillian wants to go to this restaurant. And for the sake of this video, I'll just say it's Norms, because we have Norms out here in California and I do not like Norms. I haven't been there in years in their defense, so maybe they got better now. But like years ago, Norms, not it. So Norms has a particular reputation. So when Susie came up to us and told us, oh, Lillian wants to go to Norms, I was like, I'm not really trying to go there. And the boys were not really trying to go there either. And I'm just, you know, being stupid, and I was just like, it's like Denny's with roaches. And the boys are like laughing and stuff like that, and they're like agreeing. Susie, like, I didn't even like hear her, but like we're all outside in the parking lot at this point talking to different people and stuff like that. Susie went over to Lillian, and I didn't even hear Susie, but she must have told Lillian that I had said that Norms was basically Denny's with roaches. She told her that, and Lillian just starts like making a scene. She just starts like going off like, oh my gosh, it is not Denny's with roaches. Like, Denny's food is nasty. Norm's food is so good, and blah, blah, blah. And she's literally like yelling in the parking lot. And I was just like, I was joking, but I wasn't. But she was just like, just going in like as if I had like personally attacked her and like offended her. And I was like, great. Here I am looking like the bougie girl from California, you know, like downplaying Norms. So Lillian is literally making this big old scene for like a few minutes. She starts like trying to bring like other people into it. She's like telling these like 2 girls that are standing nearby, like, Denny's food is nasty and Norm's food is not like that. And one of the girls is like, you could lose your life at Norm's though. And I was just like, you know, kind of trying to ease my way out of just this whole scenario, because she's really like going off making a scene. So anyway, I get with my group and we all kind of just decide like, we're just gonna go home because it's already like almost 3 in the morning. I'm like, you know, do you guys want to hang out one last time in the morning before I have to leave in the afternoon and stuff like that? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, we could go get lunch or something like that. And they're like, yeah, they're down. So Susie ended up not wanting to go to Norm's with them. she just wanted to go back home. So I ended up taking her home. As I'm driving the boys back to their Airbnb, like my vision just starts like fogging up. Like I could barely see. I know that it was partly because I had not literally like had like a good night's sleep since leaving home like 2 days prior or whatever it was. So I was like super tired and like my eyes just like could not, it felt like they could not focus. So I was getting really concerned because they were all staying like close to downtown. And again, my brother's friend lived 30 miles outside the city. So I had to drive 30 miles back to where I was staying, and it was super late at night. It was like 3 in the morning and I was like not able to see. So I'm like getting frustrated and like agitated and stuff, and Chucky like notices. Chucky actually wasn't staying with the other boys. Every time I would drop them off, he would catch an Uber to where he was staying, and he was staying outside the city too. So he was just like, I can drive you back to where you're staying and then I'll catch an Uber from there. Chucky, you're a lifesaver, a real one. By the time I got to bed, it was already like 4:30 in the morning. So the next day I was leaving to go home. Me and the crew, we were just gonna go get lunch until it was time for me to drop them off and head back to the airport. So we ate lunch, we had really good conversation, and we were just having a good time. I felt like the whole time I was with them, with the 4 of them, like we just had a really good time. We had like, you know, just conversation about different things regarding music and, you know, stuff like that. So it starts to get later. I end up dropping Tommy and Dill off at their Airbnb, and Chucky and Susie were just gonna come with me to the airport because Susie actually had a show that was literally like 7 or 8 minutes from the airport. It was really close to the airport. So they were like, we'll just come with you, we'll say our goodbyes, and then we'll catch an Uber from the airport to the show. So when I'm driving to the airport, I ended up going to the wrong car rental place because there were multiple of them. They ended up having to send me to the right one. So it was like, it just felt like there was like traffic and then there was this and that. Like it was like delays and delays like for me to get to the airport. But I was thinking I'm good, you know, there's still like an hour before my flight and stuff like that. So I finally get to the rental car place, you know, give the car back. Me and Chucky and Susie are, you know, like walking to basically the desk where I'm gonna check in and all that stuff, and where we were gonna say our goodbyes. So we said our goodbyes, and then I go to the desk to check in, and they're basically like, you can't get on this flight because it is like 43 minutes to boarding time and you have to be at least 45 minutes early. So they end up telling me that the next flight out is going to be the next morning at like, it was either like 4 or 5 in the morning. So I was just like, all right, and I'm like trying to figure out like, where am I gonna stay tonight, and you know, stuff like that. But it ended up working out because I really didn't need to stay anywhere. And I was like, I'll just go back, hang out with the crew, whatever they're doing, go to their shows and, you know, whatever they have today. And then I'll go back to the airport and just wait until it's time for me to leave. So I end up calling Chucky, and Chucky's like, yeah, we're at the show. We're at Susie's show. And it's literally around the corner from the airport, and Tommy and Dill are already here. I'm like, cool, more time for us to have fun. So I go and get another car, and then I drive over to the show, and it was probably a total of like 20 minutes or so between when I called Chucky to when I got to the show. And so I get there, and Susie is having a conversation with Lillian. And basically what happened was Lillian told Susie that she could not perform at the show because she didn't make it on time to sound check or something like that, or she didn't get to the show early enough to sound check. Let me tell you guys why this is ridiculous. There were probably like 14 people at that show, like people that like paid for a ticket and went. I don't know why they were acting like it was Madison Square Garden. The other reason why it's ridiculous is because Susie literally got there maybe 45 minutes to an hour before the show actually started. Maybe 30 minutes. 30 minutes is like the least, because we were sitting outside for a minute before the show started. So she definitely had time to sound check, and she was just playing tracks. It wasn't like she had a full-on band or anything like that to sound check. It was literally just a DJ that was gonna play the track. That was it. It just didn't really make any sense to me. It didn't really make any sense to Susie. It didn't really make any sense to any of us, but Lillian said she couldn't perform. So Susie's outside, upset, but she's also kind of, you know, greeting different artists, you know, wanting to get a picture with certain artists that are there that she's met and stuff like that. And there was actually a girl who, another artist, who had driven from out of state to come and see Susie in this show, and Susie ended up not being able to perform, which was like really sad. But that girl, like, you know, they got to hang out outside for a little bit, you know, take some pictures, take some videos and stuff like that. That girl has always been sweet to me, has always been like a huge supporter of like me and my production and stuff like that, so it was cool for me to get to meet her as well. So Susie's like trying to accommodate, you know, these different people and stuff like that, but she's obviously upset. I see Tommy and Dill, and they're at the door, like trying to like look into the show. I could only see through like a little crack, but you guys, it looked like, I know this is so mean, but like I'm just being honest to get you guys to visualize like what it was. It looked like a middle school dance in there, like an open floor with like nobody in there, people just standing along on the sides of the walls. And I'm not trying to diss this show, because I've definitely performed at shows where nobody was there. So like I'm not, you know, trying to act like I'm above that or anything in any way. I just want you guys to get a visual and to fully understand like why it was so ridiculous that they weren't letting her perform at like this little show. So Tommy and Dill are at the door. I can hear Tommy, and he is like going off on the guy at the door because Tommy paid for the conference. So him and Dill have wristbands, and they're like, we should be able to get into this event, we shouldn't have to pay. And the guy at the door, we're gonna call him P because he actually has some significance later in the story. P is telling them this event is not a part of the conference, so you have to pay to get into this event. And Tommy is upset, and Tommy is going in and going off and being like, you know, telling the guy that he's being ridiculous, that this is stupid, that they shouldn't have to pay to get in here, and like, you know, just this and that. Like he's like upset. I just want to point out that the guy P at the door that wasn't letting Tommy in, I've never seen this guy in my life. That was my first time ever seeing him. I had never seen him before in my life. Anyway, my grandma calls me, so I'm talking to her on the phone for a minute. Susie is trying to figure out, you know, what her next move is. After I get off the phone, me and the boys are kind of just like hanging around the area. It was like a school or something, because we went inside and we were like, you know, sitting down, just kind of waiting on Susie and trying to figure out like what are we gonna do next. And it was hilarious because I remember somebody said that they wanted to go to the mall, and so I looked up the mall on maps, and literally the first picture that popped up was people fighting. So I was like, I'm good on the mall. So we're all sitting there, and Tommy actually gets a text from this other producer who I'm gonna call him Chaz in this story. And Chaz I had actually met before. Like, I think it was actually that same year. I had met him earlier that year. We had had like, you know, good conversations. We had like kind of kept in touch and stuff like that. But Tommy actually knew Chaz really well. And Chaz hit him up and was like, where are y'all at? Because I'm at the main event center with some people and I am bored out of my mind and I don't really want to hang out with them anymore. I feel like you would think that Chaz was like a teenager. Chaz is like a grown man, like with a wife and kids, like, yeah. So anyway, Tommy tells him we're at the show, the dude here is being stupid, he's not letting us in, you know, these people are not letting Susie perform and all this stuff. And he's like, yo, come through. And so he's like, okay, like, do y'all want to go there? And I'm like, sure, I'm down. I asked Susie's like, yeah, I'm down, you know, I can't perform anyway. While we're in the car, Susie is venting. She's basically like, I don't understand why they have been acting funny basically this whole week. And she's like, it does not make sense that they didn't want me to perform just because they said I was too late, when like I was not too late, like very obviously not too late for this show, and I just don't get it. And she's just like, you know, venting and basically saying like, why do people gotta be ridiculous? Like, why do people gotta be like this? And Chucky basically kind of starts encouraging Susie and saying Drew, which was the guy from the show that was introducing her to like those different streaming companies and stuff like that. He's like, Drew don't really mess with Lillian like that anyway. Like, you already have a connection with him. Don't worry about her, because Susie's concern was basically like that she was messing up an opportunity. And Drew's like, don't even worry about her. Don't even worry about, you know, all the artists that you're with and stuff like that. Like, you can still get opportunities. You don't need her. And I thought that was really nice of him to say and of him to let her know. So we get to the event center. We all meet up with Chaz. And the boys are kind of like standing around talking to Chaz and all these other guys. And me and Susie are kind of like off to the side, just having a conversation, just assessing everything that we've, you know, learned so far in the past couple days. And at some point while we're standing out there, me, Susie, Tommy, Dill, and Chucky are all kind of standing like in a semicircle. We're just like talking and stuff. And this guy comes up, and we're gonna call him Stu. Stu is the owner of basically like the biggest blog in this same niche genre. I've heard of Stu, I've heard stories about Stu and stuff like that, but I had never been to his social media. I didn't know what he looked like. I didn't know that that was him. When he's walking up, Susie tells me like, oh, that's Stu. I was like, oh, okay, Stu from the blog. Stu is like, you know, basically shaking all the guys' hands, greeting them and stuff like that. And they all know him. I think that Susie, Chucky, Dill, and Tommy all already had met Stu, already knew him, all that kind of stuff. I was the only one who, like, I've never met him or anything. And his blog has posted mine and Kasari's stuff before, but the person who was like posting the stuff doesn't work there anymore. So I like didn't expect Stu to know who I was or anything like that. Like I figured he probably doesn't know who I am. So boy, was I wrong. Stu is shaking all their hands and stuff like that. And then I see when he's like shaking Tommy's hand, he kind of is like looking over at me and kind of does this like motion, like who's that, you know, type thing. And Tommy's like, oh, that's Brie K. Like I heard him say that, oh, that's Brie K. And he just was like, oh. And then Stu walks up to me. The first words out of his mouth were, I would ask you something, but I don't want to put you on the spot. Like, first of all, who are you? Second of all, this could have went a number of ways. He could have walked up and said, hi, I'm Stu. Nice to meet you. And I could have said, I'm Brie. Nice to meet you. And he could have said, you know, if you make music, you should submit it to my blog or something like that. Like that could have been the way he went about things, but he didn't. He walked up and said, I would ask you something, but I don't want to put you on the spot. And I'm just standing there like looking at him, and the boys, I believe it was like Tommy and Chucky, were like, just ask her, just tell her, what is it? And he's like, how come you guys don't submit your stuff to my blog? And I was just kind of like caught off guard because I'm just thinking like why is it an expectation or something? Like it just felt a little weird. So I was just like, do you think we should? And he was like, well, yeah, you know, you got your guys' stuff is really dope and like we've hit you up multiple times. And I was like, you've never hit me up. And he was like, yes, we have. It might have been through my account. It might have been through my blog's account. And I was like, your account, your blog's account, you've never hit me up. And that's fine. Like I don't expect you to, but just don't say you did if you didn't. And I'm tired and hungry at this point, so I kind of have a little attitude. Stu is like, yes, we have. I'll pull up the receipts right now. And I kind of start getting a little trolly with him, and I'm like, you're not gonna find any receipts. You're not gonna pull any up, Stewie. Like, you're not gonna find the receipts because you've never hit me up. Because they haven't. They have never hit me up. Chaz and like some other guys come out of the event center and they're like, yo, we're ready to go. We want to get some chicken. You guys want to meet us there, whatever. We're like, okay. So we all disperse. My group goes with me, their group goes with them. So when we're walking to the car and when we get into the car, like I'm starting to get heated. I'm just kind of feeling like, who does he think he is to like come up to me and be like, why don't you submit your stuff to our blog? Like as if I'm expected to, like as if that's something that I have to do or something like that. Like I just kind of took it that way and I like started getting heated. And I also was getting heated because I'm like, okay, if you're over here saying, oh, you guys are dope, and I'm telling the boys and Susie this, right? I'm like, okay, if he's over here saying, oh, you guys are dope, why don't you guys submit your stuff? Like you're sitting here watching my every move, listening to every piece of music that we drop. Like why wouldn't you just post it? I don't understand that. And so the boys are like, yeah, I don't really understand. And like Susie was at the time, she was just like, I submit my stuff to them all the time and they never post it. And then Chucky was like, I never submit my stuff to them and they always post my stuff. So everybody had a different story about this blog. And I was like, they've posted our stuff in the past, but like we just haven't sent anything to them in a while. We just haven't. And it wasn't like we were like trying not to or anything like that. We just haven't done it. But I just couldn't get over the fact that like, you've heard our stuff, you think it's dope, why don't you post it? Like I didn't understand that. So we're driving to the restaurant, I'm venting, and I'm basically like, you know, this is the kind of fake stuff that I'm talking about. You know, like I'm just getting heated. And half the reason is because I'm tired and hungry. So I told them that, I was like, you guys, okay, I'm hungry. So like, nobody bring anything up. Just let me eat first. And then he and I can have a conversation. And they were like, okay. We get to the restaurant, we're waiting in line because there's a line like out the door for this place. Stu comes up and he's like, oh, I pulled up the receipts. And I was like, okay, and then where are they? And he was just like, oh, my phone just died. Like just being dumb. And I was just like, you've never hit me up. I don't expect you to hit me up. That's fine. But just don't be saying you did when you didn't. One of the boys, I believe it was Tommy, one of them was like, hey, Stu, so if you think her music is dope, then how come you don't just post it? And I was just like thinking like, guys, I told you to wait until after I eat because I didn't want to have a heated exchange with him right here. But here we are. Stu like kind of starts getting upset, and he's basically like asking me like, what are the ideal blogs that, you know, you and Kasari want to be on? And I was just like, there are none. Like, I don't have any. And he like didn't believe me, and he's just like, yeah, right, there's no blogs that you want to be on and stuff like that. And I'm like, no. I didn't even understand what he was getting at. Like, it was all going over my head. I was like, I don't understand why he's so pressed, like asking me, oh, how come you guys don't submit your stuff, and how come you don't do this and that? Like, who are you, first? Second, like, why do I need to, right? We're having like a heated exchange, and I don't remember everything that we mentioned, but I do remember just telling him like, I don't have any dream blog that I'm trying to get on. Like, I really don't. We just kept going back and forth and back and forth, and like he ended up paying for my food, and I was like, are you paying for me? And he was like, yes, I want to prove a point to you. I don't understand what that had to do with anything, but I was like, okay, thanks. Chaz ended up like pulling me to the side and was basically like, Stu is old school, and the way that he's looking at this situation is that he's taking it personally. Like, he thinks that you and Kasari are basically being entitled by not submitting your stuff to his blog. He thinks that you guys are like intentionally not posting stuff to his blog. And I was like, I didn't even know that that's what we were arguing about right now. Like, I didn't even know that he was feeling personally attacked. Like, he felt like me and Kasari sit around and be like, we're gonna post to this blog, that blog, but not this one, because they should post us on their own. Like, that's how he was taking it. And I'm just like, I've never met this man in my life. Like, why would he think that? But he did. So I went back to Stu, and I was just like, hey, Chaz kind of just explained the situation to me. Like, I'm sorry that you felt that way. Like, I did not even understand that that's where you're coming from. And I was like, Kasari and I do not sit around and plot like, we're gonna submit to this blog, and we're just gonna skip over your blog because your blog should post this or something like that. I was like, it's not personal like that. Like, we don't submit to blogs at all. And I was basically like, honestly, we're not working as hard as we can to promote our music. We just put our music out. We don't even get that far to like putting it on blogs and stuff like that. He was just like way more mellow after that. He just kind of like calmed down and like wasn't taking it so personally anymore. But it was so weird to me to like meet somebody, another grown man with a full-on family and everything, that would take something so personally when like I don't know him. Like we've never had a conversation. Like, how are you taking stuff personally from me? Anyway, after that, it was cool. We had, you know, good conversation. I found out that he lived in California and stuff like that. We were like, yo, we should meet up, which never ended up being able to happen because he's a busy person, which is fine. We ended up having cool conversation at the table with different people. Again, we had a good time. We go to leave this restaurant, and Stu's friend that like runs the blog with him ends up like coming up to me and apologizing for Stu. And he's just like, Stu comes off as a jerk and he doesn't mean to, but he does. So I'm sorry. And I was just like, oh, it's all good. You know, whatever. I'm good. I'm cool now. I ate. I'm feeling good. Me, Susie, and the boys end up going back to the ice cream spot, and we end up sitting outside again at that shopping center, and we're just talking about different things. And the boys actually really start talking about streaming, and you know, they're pointing out how Susie had this song that like did really well. It like got over 1 million streams and stuff like that. They kind of start pointing out how like me and Kasari were not getting any streams on Spotify at that time, and they're like, why? Like, I don't understand, you know, why? They were kind of just giving me pointers, like, you guys should collaborate with different people and stuff like that. Tommy was like, can I ask you a question? And I was like, yes. And he was like, can me and Dill produce a track for you guys? And I'm just like, yes, like, absolutely you can. And then Chucky's like, wait, can I produce a track for you guys? I'm like, yes. Like, first of all, I had no idea that you guys wanted to, you know what I mean? Like, and it was very sweet to me. Like, it was so nice that they wanted to work with us. Like, that was very, very nice. And we have worked with them and are continuing actually to work with them and stuff like that even today. So that was cool. And then Chucky and Dill like start telling stories about how like, they have like hit me and Kasari up like years prior, and like either we didn't respond to them or like we said no or something like that. And I was just like, I'm sorry guys, like we didn't know, you know, like I didn't know you guys, and like sometimes the messages get lost and stuff like that when I don't like reply right away, and you know, stuff like that. And it was just like fun. Like, we were just having a good time. Lillian starts hitting Susie up, or I think she says she's gonna come pick her up, and then she says she can't pick her up, and it was like a little back and forth there. And I think Susie had told her like, oh, I'm still with, you know, with them, with Bree and them. I don't remember which conversation it was, but I'm pretty sure it was this one, where Lillian was basically like, oh, well, can you have like Kasari or whoever like bring you over here? And Susie was like, it's Bree K. And she was like, yeah, whoever. I don't know why Lillian was salty. Like, I really don't. And I didn't care. I honestly like didn't take it personally or anything like that. I was just like, okay. Susie's like, they're at Norm's again, right? She wants to know like if you could drop me off over there or whatever. And I was like, oh yeah, I'll take you over there. Me and all the boys, we take Susie over to the parking lot where the Norm's is, and it's in the same parking lot as, I think it was a Target. It was like a Target or some grocery store or something like that. We sit in the parking lot for a while, and one of Chucky's songs actually hit 1 million plays, like as we were sitting in the parking lot. And so we're blasting the song in the car. Tommy's getting out and dancing and stuff like that, and we're just like having a good time, like in this empty parking lot. And we're basically just waiting until Lillian tells Susie that her and her artists are like ready to leave Norm's so that Susie can go with them. So when Susie had talked to Lillian earlier, I think that she told her that we had come from dinner with Stu and Chaz and some other people, and I don't think that Lillian liked that. Like, I think she kind of made that clear to Susie that she felt left out, basically, because her and her artists didn't come with us to have dinner with Stu and them. So anyway, we're in the parking lot, we're having a good time, and then Lillian tells Susie that they're ready to leave the Norm. So she's like, okay, we're here. So we start walking over to the Norm's. The way that it was situated, like the parking lot was kind of like behind the Norm's building. We're walking around the side of the Norm's. Guess what happens, guys? Tell me why a roach comes running out the side of the building. Just remember, Lillian made that big old deal that I said it was like Denny's with roaches, and a roach literally ran out of the building. Anyway, we walk to the front. Lillian and her group come out. None of them, like not Lillian, none of the artists, they didn't say anything to me and the boys. Only one of them like walked up and introduced himself to me and like greeted the boys and stuff like that, and I thought that was really nice, but the rest of them didn't say anything to us at all. And I didn't care about that, but that kind of rubbed Tommy the wrong way, because Tommy's kind of emotional and he doesn't like stuff like that. So Susie's gonna go with Lillian, and like we say our goodbyes because this is it. Like, I'm gonna head to the airport after this, you know. Me and the boys decide to go inside the Target. The boys are basically, they're like playing in the kids section, and again, having a good time. They bought some of those like poppers that you throw on the ground, and so we go outside and they're throwing them and stuff like that, like, and again, just a good time. And we basically did that until it was time for me to drop them off and then go to the airport. I finally went back home, and it took a few like different flights for that to happen, because I ended up on a standby list like several times where I didn't make it onto the plane and stuff like that. But I ended up getting back home. Under normal circumstances, the story would stop here, but these aren't normal circumstances. A few days later, Susie calls me and she tells me that this guy, I just called her, and this guy's an artist, and he was not even at the conference, but she said he was basically giving her a play-by-play of like her whole weekend at the conference when he wasn't there. And from his perspective, the way that he's telling her the story, in Susie's own words, she said it seemed like he was making Susie sound like just the most problematic artist ever to work with. Basically what happened was this guy had talked to Lillian, and Lillian told him the whole story from her own perspective. And Lillian basically was upset with Susie for like hanging out with us the whole time, because I guess Lillian felt like Susie should be hanging out with her manager and like the artist that manager's managing or something like that. So remember P from the show that would not let Tommy and Dill into the show? Again, I've never seen this man in my life, and apparently he was in Lillian's ear. Lily thought that Susie and I were lying about why Susie was late to her sound check, because Susie told her that we were going to the airport because I was trying to catch my flight to go home, right? Since I ended up missing my flight and I was at the show and Lillian didn't know that I missed my flight, she was thinking like, how is she late getting here because Brie K was going to the airport, but Brie K somehow at the show after? Like, it didn't add up to her. But of course, she never actually asked Susie what happened, so she didn't know that I missed my flight. And then P over here, again, I can't emphasize enough, I had never seen this man in my life prior to when he was at the door at that second show. P over here was telling Lillian that he saw us out earlier that day having fun. Like, how dare we get tacos and have fun? That's first of all. Second of all, none of us saw him at the taco place, and it wasn't like the place was crowded or anything. It was like pretty empty. So I don't know how he saw us out having fun. That was the only place that we went. Unless he was like literally like in the taco place's windows, like spying on us or something. But like, that's kind of creepy, right? Like, we did not see him there, and he said that he saw us out. Like, how? Lillian did not like that Susie was hanging around with us instead of her. It seemed like she was just trying to find things to poke at to make Susie seem like an irresponsible artist or something like that, when I really think that Lillian probably just felt kind of left out, to be honest. So Susie ended up calling Lillian and clarifying everything with her and telling her like, no, the reason why we went to the airport for Brie to leave, but Brie was still at the show is because Brie missed her flight. And I think they kind of cleared things up, but Susie was just kind of like over the whole situation, reasonably so. Me and Susie are still kind of like confused about the whole thing. Like, we still think it's really weird, but I was super confused by the whole thing because like, I'm literally nobody. Like, I could understand if it was like she was hanging out with me and I'm like this like multi-platinum artist that like everybody wants to hang around and stuff like that. Like, I'm literally nobody. Like, I don't understand why she would feel left out. Maybe she felt left out because of the boys, because Tommy, Dill, Chucky, and Susie, all of them are like more successful in their music careers than I am, like tangibly. Like, they all get way more streams, they all have way more followers, all of them do music full time and stuff like that. I'm the only one that doesn't. So maybe she was like jealous about that or something. Like, she wanted to hang out with them and connect with them and stuff like that, but like, she could have did that anywhere, at the show, at the showcase, like anything. She could have done that, but she didn't. So I don't really understand what the problem was. So then, I know this is like the never-ending story. A couple days after this, Susie sends me the picture that we had actually taken at her first show with Lillian. It was me, Susie, and Lillian that took that picture, right? She sends me the picture. Tell me why. Guess who is lurking in the background of that picture? Just guess. Freaking P, you guys. Freaking P is lurking in the background of that picture. And mind you, I never saw him when we were at that show. Like, I did not see him one time. I had never seen him in my life until the next day. And this is the same man that was in Lillian's ear saying that he saw us out having fun. I don't know when. That's crazy, right? I still have no idea who he is or why he was creeping on us or why he was talking to Lillian about us. Like, I literally have no idea. Also, around the same time, Dill ends up sending a text to me, Chucky, Susie, and Tommy. It's a video of somebody at a Norm's falling out of the ceiling, landing on a table, and running out the door. I'm not wrong about Norms. And that's the end of the story. The moral of the story, there's probably a lot of morals to the story, but you guys tell me in the comments, because I don't even fully know. Again, I just want to point out that the instances that I had with some of the people in the story don't necessarily reflect who they are today, and don't necessarily reflect even who they were in that time as a whole, because it was just a snapshot that I got of them, you know, in those moments and stuff like that. So I kind of do want to show grace to like those sorts of things, but I didn't tell one lie. If you guys enjoyed this story time, please let me know. If you made it, first of all, if you made it this far into this long video, you definitely liked it. So please give it a thumbs up. If you're not subscribed to my channel, please go ahead and click subscribe and go ahead and click that bell so you can be notified every single time I post a video. I don't know if you guys like these story times, but I figured I'd just give a long story time because Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. I think that is everything. I know that was kind of a lot of names. I hope that you guys are able to keep up. If any of you guys know this story or anything like that, know who I'm talking about, know where this was, please don't say in the comments. I don't know why, but I do want to protect the identities of the people in this story. If any of you are in the story and you want to reveal your identity, then that's totally up to you. Those of you who weren't, if you know who it is, please just keep that between us. Just keep that right here. All right, I think that is everything. Okay, peace out.